Welcome to Cinema, your destination for endless entertainment and unforgettable movie moments. Discover exciting films, inspiring stories, and cinematic journeys across every genre. Whether you love action, drama, thrillers, or timeless favorites, there's always something waiting for you here. Sit back, enjoy the experience, and let Cinema bring the magic of movies to your screen. 50 Shades of Grey is a 2015 American erratic romantic drama directed by Sam Taylor Johnson from a screenplay by Kelly Marcel. The film was produced by Focus Features, Michael DeLuca Productions, and Trigger Street Productions, and distributed by Universal Pictures. Based on E.L. James' best-selling 2011 novel of the same name, it serves as the first installment in the 50 Shades film series. The film stars Dakota Johnson, Jamie Dornan, Jennifer L., and Marcia Gay Harden. The story follows Anastasia Anna Steele Johnson, a recent college graduate who becomes involved in an intense sadomasochistic relationship with a young and wealthy businessman Christian Grey, Dornan. Development of the film began in March 2012 after Universal Pictures and Focus Features secured the rights to E.L. James' novel trilogy following a competitive bidding war. Kelly Marcel was hired to adapt the screenplay, while several directors including Joe Wright, Patty Jenkins, Bill Condon, Bennett Miller, and Steven Soderbergh were considered before Sam Taylor Johnson was officially announced as director in June 2013. She cited films such as 9 Day 1/2 Weeks, 1986, Last Tango in Paris, 1972, and Blue is the Warmest Color, 2013, as key inspirations for her approach. The principal cast joined the project between October and December 2013. Filming began in December 2013 and concluded in February 2014, with additional reshoots involving Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan taking place in Vancouver in October 2014. The film's score was composed by Danny Elfman. 50 Shades of Grey premiered at the 69th Berlin International Film Festival on February 11, 2015, before receiving a worldwide release in IMAX theaters on February 13, 2015, through Universal Pictures. Despite receiving mixed to largely negative reviews from critics, the film became a massive commercial success. Produced on a budget of approximately $40 million, it earned nearly $570 million worldwide, breaking several box office records. The soundtrack also received widespread acclaim. Ellie Goulding's Love Me Like You Do earned a Golden Globe Award nomination for Best Original Song, while The Weeknd's Earned It received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song at the 88th Academy Awards. However, the film also dominated the 36th Golden Raspberry Awards, winning 5 of its 6 nominations, including Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Actress. The movie was followed by 2 sequels, 50 Shades Darker, 2017, and 50 Shades Freed, 2018. Like the original, both films received largely negative critical reviews but achieved strong box office success. Plot: 21-year-old Anastasia Anna Steele is an English literature student at Washington State University, Vancouver in Vancouver, Washington, when her roommate, Kate Kavanaugh, falls ill and is unable to interview billionaire entrepreneur Christian Grey for the college newspaper. Anne agrees to take her place. Nervous and awkward during their first meeting at Christian's Seattle headquarters, and unexpectedly captures his attention. Soon afterward, Christian visits the hardware store where Anna works and offers to participate in a photo shoot to accompany the newspaper article. He later invites her out for coffee but abruptly ends the meeting after Anne admits she is a hopeless romantic. Christian tells her that he is not the man for her. Despite this, he sends her first edition copies of 2 Thomas Hardy novels, including Tess of the D'Urbervilles, along with a handwritten note warning about the complexities of relationships. After graduation, Anna celebrates with her friends at a local bar. Intoxicated, she calls Christian to tell him she intends to return his books while criticizing his confusing behavior. Concerned for her safety, Christian arrives at the bar just as Anna's photographer friend, Jose Tilde copywriter Rodriguez attempts to kiss her without her consent, and suddenly becomes ill, vomits, and loses consciousness. The following morning, Anna wakes up in Christian's hotel room, relieved to learn that nothing happened between them while she was unconscious. Their relationship quickly grows closer. After sharing a kiss in an elevator and taking a helicopter ride together, romance begins to blossom. Christian, however, insists that Anna first sign a strict non-disclosure agreement preventing her from discussing any aspect of their relationship. He then explains that he practices BDSM as a dominant and only enters relationships governed by carefully negotiated contracts, and also reveals that she's a virgin, as she reviews and negotiates the contract. Christian introduces her to his famous Red Room, a private space equipped with specialized furniture and BDSM equipment. Although initially overwhelmed, Anna decides to continue exploring the relationship. They spend their first night together, and the following morning she prepares breakfast before meeting Christian's adoptive mother. During a drive together, Christian reveals that he was introduced to the dominant lifestyle at the age of 15 by an older woman whom Anna jokingly nicknames Mrs. Robinson. His parents remain unaware of this aspect of his life, despite Mrs. Robinson being a longtime family friend. Christian continues to shower Anna with expensive gifts, including a new car and a laptop. After Anna and Kate move to Seattle, he urges her to carefully consider and sign their relationship contract. Although hesitant at first, Anna gradually becomes more willing to continue under his terms. During dinner at Christian's parents' home, Anna casually mentions that she plans to visit her mother in Georgia the following day. Christian reacts with visible frustration, especially after Anna admits she wants a deeper emotional relationship than the strictly controlled arrangement he envisions. In Georgia, Christian unexpectedly arrives to surprise her. He meets her mother, takes Anna on a glider flight, and then returns to Seattle to deal with an urgent business matter. Back in Seattle, Anna and Christian spend another evening together in the Red Room. Although she agrees to participate in his preferred activities, she becomes increasingly distressed by his emotional distance. Wanting to better understand his mindset, Anna asks Christian to demonstrate the harshest punishment he would impose for breaking the rules of their agreement. Christian reluctantly complies, striking her several times with a belt while instructing her to count each blow aloud. The experience deeply wounds Anna emotionally. Heartbroken, she tells Christian that she loves him but cannot accept the kind of relationship he offers. Unable to reconcile their fundamentally different emotional needs, Anna decides to leave him, ending their relationship. After hearing Christian's explanation, Anna tells him that he is too emotionally damaged to have the kind of relationship she wants. Heartbroken and overwhelmed, she leaves him. Christian promises to send her a check for the car he sold without her permission. As he rushes after her, their eyes meet one last time. Anna holds his gaze and softly says his name as the elevator doors close, bringing their relationship to a painful end. By early 2012, several major Hollywood studios were competing for the film rights to the 50 Shades trilogy, which had become a New York Times bestseller. Companies including Warner Brothers, Sony, Paramount, Universal Pictures, and Mark Wahlberg's production company all submitted bids. In March 2012, Universal Pictures and Focus Features secured the rights to the trilogy. Author E.L. James negotiated to retain a degree of creative control over the adaptation. She selected producers Michael DeLuca and Dana Brunetti, best known for producing The Social Network, to oversee the project. Although Bret Easton Ellis publicly expressed interest in writing the screenplay, Kelly Marcel, known for saving Mr. Banks, was ultimately hired. Later, Patrick Marber joined the project to refine the screenplay, focusing particularly on character development, while Mark Wambach was brought in for additional script revisions. Mark Bridges served as the film's costume designer. According to Entertainment Weekly, The film's production budget was estimated at around $40 million. By May 9, 2013, the studio was considering Joe Wright as director, but scheduling conflicts prevented the collaboration. Other filmmakers reportedly considered included Patty Jenkins, Bill Condon, Bennett Miller, and Steven Soderbergh. In June 2013, E.L. James announced that Sam Taylor Johnson would direct the adaptation. Taylor Johnson reportedly earned more than $2 million for directing the film. She cited Les Tango in Paris and Blue is the Warmest Color as major creative inspirations. In a 2017 interview, Taylor Johnson revealed that creative disagreements with E.L. James ultimately led her to leave the franchise. Reflecting on the experience, she said she did not regret making the film, but admitted she would not choose to go through the same experience again. Bret Easton Ellis later claimed that Robert Pattinson had been E.L. James's first choice to play Christian Grey. However, she believed casting him alongside his Twilight co-star Kristen Stewart would feel awkward. Ian Somerhalder and Chase Crawford also expressed interest in the role. Somerhalder later admitted that even if he had been selected, filming would have conflicted with his schedule on the TV series The Vampire Diaries. On September 2, 2013, E.L. James officially announced that Charlie Hunnam and Dakota Johnson had been cast as Christian Grey and Anastasia Steele. Other actresses reportedly considered for Anastasia included Alicia Vikander, Imogen Poots, Elizabeth Olsen, Shailene Woodley, and Felicity Jones. Kaya Scodelario auditioned for an undisclosed role, while Lucy Hale also auditioned for the film. Emilia Clarke was offered the role of Anastasia but declined because of the extensive nudity the part required. To help actresses prepare for auditions, Taylor Johnson asked each candidate for Anastasia to perform a 4-page monologue from Persona, directed by Ingmar Bergman. The studio initially hoped to cast Ryan Gosling as Christian Grey, but he was not interested in the role. Garrett Hedlund was also considered but reportedly did not connect with the character. Stephen O'Neill later stated that he would not have accepted the role because he did not find Christian Grey particularly interesting. Charlie Hunnam initially declined the role but changed his mind after meeting with the studio executives. Describing the casting process, he explained that after reading the first novel and later performing a screen test with Dakota Johnson, he immediately felt a strong connection. He recalled that their chemistry was undeniable, making the experience feel exciting, enjoyable, unusual, and emotionally compelling. Following backlash from fans over the casting choices, producer Dana Brunetti defended the decision by explaining that casting involves far more than physical appearance. Factors such as talent, availability, interest in the project, and on-screen chemistry all play an important role, which is why some fan-favorite actors may not ultimately be selected. In October 2013, Jennifer L. entered negotiations to play Anastasia's mother, Carla. However, on October 12, Universal Pictures announced that Charlie Hunnam had left the project because of scheduling conflicts with his FX television series Sons of Anarchy. After his departure, actors including Jamie Dornan, Christian Cook, Theo James, and Franny Sexuas were considered as potential replacements for the role of Christian Grey. After Charlie Hunnam left the project, several actors, including Scott Eastwood, Luke Bracey, and Billy Magnuson, were considered to replace him as Christian Grey. On October 23, 2013, Jamie Dornan was officially cast in the role. A week later, on October 31, 2013, Victor Rasuke joined the cast as Jose Rodriguez Jr. Eloise Mumford was cast as Kate Kavanaugh on November 22, 2013, and on December 2, 2013, singer Rita Ora was announced as Christian's younger sister, Mia. Interestingly, Ora had originally hoped to contribute to the film's soundtrack before landing the acting role. The following day, Marcia Gay Harden was cast as Christian's adoptive mother, Grace Trevelyan Gray. Filming was initially scheduled to begin on November 5, 2013, in Vancouver, British Columbia. However, Producer Michael DeLuca later announced that production would instead start on November 13, after another delay. Principal photography finally began on December 1, 2013. Several well-known Vancouver locations were transformed for the film. The historic Gaston district served as one of the primary filming locations, while Bantall 5 stood in as the headquarters of Grey Enterprises. The University of British Columbia doubled as Washington State University Vancouver, where Anastasia Steele graduates. The luxurious Fairmont Hotel Vancouver was used to portray the famous Heathman Hotel, and additional scenes were filmed at North Shore Studios. Production officially wrapped on February 21, 2014. Later that year, during the week of October 13, 2014, Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson returned to Vancouver for several reshoots. Throughout production, the film operated under the secret working title The Adventures of Max and Banks. Uncredited screenwriter Mark Bombach later remarked that he had never worked on a project surrounded by such intense secrecy, describing the set as being under strict lockdown. The film also became the final project edited by legendary Academy Award-winning editor Ranvi Coates before her passing in 2018. An alternative ending was filmed but ultimately not included in the theatrical release. In these scenes, both Anna and Christian reflect on their relationship through emotional flashbacks. Christian is seen jogging through the rain while Anna cries alone in her apartment. He eventually discovers a gift Anna had given him, accompanied by a note that reads, "This reminded me of a happy time." The film's soundtrack was released on February 10, 2015. The lead single, "Earned It" by Canadian singer The Weeknd, was released on December 24, 2014. It was followed by Love Me Like You Do by English singer Ellie Goulding on January 7, 2015. Both songs became major hits, reaching the top 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Another promotional single, Salted Wound by Australian singer Sia, was released on January 27, 2015. By May 2018, the soundtrack had sold approximately 560,000 copies in the United States. In February 2013, Universal Pictures chairman Adam Fogelson stated that the film could be ready for release as early as the following summer. The studio initially scheduled the release for August 1, 2014, but in November 2013 the date was postponed to February 13, 2015. To coincide with Valentine's Day weekend. 50 Shades of Grey premiered at the 65th Berlin International Film Festival on February 11, 2015, before opening in theaters on February 13, 2015. It was also released in 75 IMAX theaters across the United States. Universal began its marketing campaign more than a year before the film's release. On January 25, 2014, posters bearing the phrase "Mr. Great Will See You Now" appeared in 5 locations across the United States. On July 9, 2014, author E.L. James announced on Twitter that the film's first trailer would debut on July 24, 5 days before its release. Bianca Tilda Copyright shared a short teaser on Instagram featuring a preview of the trailer. On July 24, Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson appeared on The Today Show to introduce a version suitable for morning television audiences. Later that day, the complete trailer featuring more mature scenes was released online, exactly 200 days before the film's theatrical debut. The trailer featured a newly arranged version of Crazy in Love by Bianca Tilda Copyright, produced alongside her longtime collaborator Boots. It attracted an astonishing 36.4 million views during its first week, making it YouTube's most watched trailer of 2014 until it was overtaken in October by the trailer for Avengers: Age of Ultron. By mid-December, however, the 50 Shades of Grey trailer had regained the top spot with more than 93 million views, eventually surpassing 100 million views online. The trailer for 50 Shades of Grey became a global sensation, generating millions of views during its first week across multiple platforms and websites. It quickly earned the title of the most watched trailer launch in history at the time. By February 2015, The official trailer had surpassed 193 million views on YouTube alone, while all 50 Shades of Grey related promotional content had accumulated more than 329 million views, including 113 million views for the official trailer. A second trailer was released on November 13, 2014, followed by a third trailer that premiered during Super Bowl's Licks on February 1, 2015. The marketing campaign centered around the question, "Are you curious?" A slogan designed to spark intrigue and encourage audiences to experience the film for themselves. Nick Carp, Universal's president of domestic distribution, explained the strategy behind the campaign, saying that it gave audiences permission to see the film. He noted that Valentine's Day was an ideal occasion for couples, and with the extended President's Day holiday weekend, the release date created the perfect opportunity to market the movie as a romantic event, according to Carp. Emphasizing the romance angle played a key role in the film's successful promotional campaign. Before its release, there was widespread speculation that the film might receive an NC-17 rating in the United States. Studios generally avoid this adults-only classification because it can significantly reduce the film's commercial potential, with some theater chains refusing to screen NC-17 titles. While screenwriter Kelly Marcel expected the film to receive the stricter rating, producer Michael DeLuca believed it would earn the more commercially viable R rating. On January 5, 2015, the Motion Picture Association of America, MPA, officially awarded the film an R rating for its strong sexual content, including explicit dialogue, unusual behavior, graphic nudity, and strong language. Internationally, the film received a wide range of classifications. In Australia, it was rated MA15+ for strong sex scenes, sexual themes, and nudity. The British Board of Film Classification awarded it an 18 certificate, citing strong sexual content. In Canada, the film received an 18 rating in Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta, and British Columbia due to disturbing scenes and partial or full nudity in sexual situations. Quebec classified it as suitable for viewers age 16 and older because of its erotic content. France assigned the film a 12 rating, while Lebanon gave it an NC-21 classification. In Argentina, the National Institute of Cinema and Audiovisual Arts, INCA, rated it SAM-16R. Mexico issued a C rating, restricting admission to viewers aged 18 and older. The anti-pornography organization Morality and Media criticized IMPA's decision to grant the film an R rating, arguing that it failed to adequately warn audiences about the film's violent themes and sexual content. The group claimed that the decision effectively encouraged sexual violence by allowing the film to avoid an NC-17 classification. Although 50 Shades of Grey was scheduled for release in Malaysia on February 12, 2015, the Malaysian Film Censorship Board, LPF, refused to approve it, citing what it described as unnatural and sadistic content. LPF chairman Abdul Halim Abdul Hamid stated that the film was more pornography than a movie. The film was also banned in Indonesia, Kenya, Russia's North Caucasus region, the United Arab Emirates, Papua New Guinea, Cambodia, and India. In Nigeria, it played in theaters for only 1 week before being removed by the National Film and Video Censors Board. Universal also decided not to pursue a theatrical release in China. In the Philippines, religious protests led to the censorship of several sex scenes, resulting in a limited release with an R18 rating from the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board, MTRCB. Zimbabwe received a similarly edited version. Vietnam removed approximately 20 minutes from the film, eliminating all sex scenes, including the sequence in which Anastasia is struck with a belt. On February 2, 2015, a Michigan resident petitioned to stop the film from being shown at a local Celebration cinema. Despite the complaint, the theater's president refused to cancel the screenings, stating that the company had been in business for 70 years and that it was not the role of movie theaters to censor widely released films. Before its premiere, The theater had already sold approximately 3,000 tickets and expected total sales to reach around 10,000. Thomas Williams of the Notre Dame Center for Ethics and Culture also commented on the film's Valentine's Day release in the United States. He noted the irony of releasing a bondage-themed erotic film on a holiday that honors a Christian martyr, describing the decision as inappropriate and unclassy in the eyes of many observers. 50 Shades of Grey was released on DVD and Blu-ray on May 8, 2015. The Blu-ray edition included an unrated version featuring approximately 3 additional minutes of footage, most of which appeared in an alternate ending. The home media release was an immediate success. It topped both Nielsen Video Scan's First Alert chart, which tracks combined DVD and Blu-ray sales, and the Blu-ray sales chart for 2 consecutive weeks through the week ending May 17, 2015. At the worldwide box office, 50 Shades of Grey earned $166.2 million in the United States and Canada, along with approximately $403.5 million in international markets, for a global total of $569.7 million against a production budget of just $40 million. At the time of its release, it became the 3rd highest-grossing film directed by a woman, behind Mamma Mia and Kung Fu Panda 2. By the end of its theatrical run, it ranked as the 4th highest-grossing R-rated film of all time, trailing only The Hangover Part 2, The Passion of the Christ, and The Matrix Reloaded. According to Deadline Hollywood, the film generated an estimated net profit of approximately $265.5 million after accounting for all production, marketing, and distribution costs, along with its various revenue streams. Advance ticket sales reflected the film's extraordinary popularity. Tickets became available in the United States on January 11, 2015, and according to Fandango, 50 Shades of Grey became the fastest-selling R-rated film in the company's 15-year history, surpassing Sex and the City 2. It also recorded the strongest first week of advance ticket sales for a non-sequel, overtaking The Hunger Games, 2012. Overall, the film ranked 4th on Fandango's all-time advance ticket sales list, behind The Twilight Saga, New Moon, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows A Part 2, and The Hunger Games. The overwhelming demand prompted theater owners across the United States to add additional showtimes weeks before the film's official release. The film's release, several box office analysts suggested as much as $68 million domestic 4-day opening, while Box Office Mojo reported that a $100 million opening could be possible outside the United States. 50 Shades of Grey pre-record 4.5 million tickets in 39 markets in the UK. It sold 1.3 million to 1.9 million INS dollars worth of tickets a week before release. On release, it set several records at the box office, including in the US and Canada. It is the highest-grossing sex film, the 17th highest-grossing film of 2015, and the 4th highest-grossing romantic film of all time. It opened in the US and Canada simultaneously with Kingsman: The Secret Service on Thursday, February 12, 2015, across 2,830 theaters and was widened to 646 theaters the next day, making it the widest R-rated opening, surpassed by Mad Max Fury Road, and the 4th widest R-rated release of all time. It earned $8.6 million from Thursday night previews, which is the 2nd highest late night gross for a film released in February, behind Deadpool, and the 3rd highest for an R-rated film, behind Deadpool and The Hangover Part Roman 2. The film topped the box office on its opening day, grossing $0.2 million, including Thursday previews from 3D 646 theaters, setting a record for highest February opening day previously held by The Passion of the Christ, and for the highest overall among R-rated films during its traditional 3-day opening. The film opened at no one at the box office, earning $85 million, setting records for the biggest opening weekend for a film released in February. A record previously held by The Passion of the Christ will mean it comprised 82% of the total audience during its opening day and 68% of Valentine's Day. Revenue from the second weekend dropped massively by 73.9% to $22.25 million, which is the second biggest drop for a 3 sizes and plus a screen release, only behind Friday the 13's 80.4% drop, and the biggest for a 3/8 plus screen release. It is just the 8th film to open on more than 300 screens to drop by 70% or more. The film topped the box office for 10 consecutive weekends before falling to no 4 in its third weekend, while Focus took the top spot outside US and Canada box office. Analysts were predicting as much as $158 million opening. It opened on Wednesday, February 11, 2015, in 4 countries, earning $3.7 million. It opened in 34 more countries on February 12, earning $28.6 million in 2 days. The film set opening day records for Universal Pictures in 25 markets and opening dry records for an R-rated film in 34 territories through Sunday, February 15th. It earned an opening weekend total of $1,556 million from 58 countries from 10,979 screens, $173.6 million through Monday, where it opened at no only in 54 of the 58 countries, marking the biggest overseas opening for an R-rated film, the 4th biggest of 2015, and Universal's 3rd biggest overseas opening weekend ever. The film set an all-time opening record in 13 markets. The Universal's biggest opening weekend eve in 30 markets and biggest opening for any R-rated film in 31 markets. The biggest opener outside of the United States was witnessed in the UK, Ireland and Malta, where it earned a $13.55 million $2.8 million in its opening weekend, which is the biggest debut ever for an 18-rated film and the second biggest for a non-sequel film behind I Am Legend. In just 10 days of their release, it became the highest-grossing 18-rated film of all time. It topped the UK box office for 2 consecutive weekends. Other high openings include Germany $14.1 million, France $12.3 million, Russia $11 million, Italy $10.1 million, Spain $8.7 million, Brazil $8.3 million, Mexico $8.1 million, Australia $8 million. In Japan, the film was unsuccessful, opening at no 5 with a $682 but falling out of the top 10 the following week. The Hollywood Reporter cited possible reasons for the film's failure, attributing it to the delayed release of the new Japanese language editions of the books, poor timing for the film release, and an R15 re-edit blurring out parts of the sex scenes. It topped the box office outside of the US for 3 consecutive weekends until it was overtaken by Warner Bros. Jupiter ascending in its 4th weekend. It became Universal Pictures' highest-grossing R-rated film of all time overseas, breaking Ted's record. Universal Pictures' highest-grossing film in 14 countries, and Universal Pictures' highest-grossing film overseas in total earnings. Its largest market overseas are the UK, Ireland and Malta $52.5 million, Germany $43.7 million, Brazil $31.3 million, France $29.5 million, and Spain $22.6 million. 50 Shades of Grey received mixed to unfavorable reviews, with the criticism of its acting, screenplay and pacing. However, some critics noted it also an improvement over the book, and others praised the cinematography and set design as well as soundtrack. The review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes reported a 25% approval rating with an average rating of 14. Titan, based on 280 reviews. Website's critical consensus reads, while creatively better endowed than its print counterpart, 50 Shades of Grey is a less than satisfying experience on the screen. Metacritic gave the film a score of 46 out of 100 based on reviews from 46 critics, indicating mixed overall reviews in CinemaScore polls conducted during the opening weekend. Cinema audiences gave the film an average Grey D of C+ on an A+ to F scale. Claudia Poog of USA Today wrote that the dialogue is laughable, the pacing is sluggish, and the performances are only a note. Moira MacDonald of the Seattle Times wrote 50 Shades of Grey the movie for the record is not quite as bad as 50 Shades of Grey the book, but that's no saying much. We got discovered critic Isaac Feldberg gave the film 1.5 stars out of 5 and wrote that it feels like two distinct films grappling for dominance over the screen, one a sensual and stylish romance and the other a numbingly explicit Harley Quinn bodice ripper brought to light life. Regrettably, the latter and lesser of the two ends up on top. The Guardian led a film critic Peter Bradshaw gave the film a 1 star out of 5, calling it the most purely tasteful and softcore depiction of sadomasochism in cinema history, with a strictly daytime soap performances. Olive Scott of the New York Times called the film terrible, but wrote that it might nonetheless be a movie that feels good to see, whether you squirm or giggle or roll your eyes or just sit still and to take your punishment in a positive review for the Daily Telegraph. Robbie Cullen called the film sexy, funny and self-aware in every way the original book is, and Elizabeth Weitzman of New York's Daily News praised the directing, a screenplay, and Johnson's performance. Boutte called Dorrian's performance the lead's chemistry and the supporting cast underused. She praised the film for honoring the essence of its source and the director's way of balancing atmosphere with action. In The Guardian, Jordan Hoffman awarded the film 3.0 F5 stars, writing this big screen adaptation still manages to be about people and even a little bit sweet, in that the sex scenes are there to advance the plot and only the most buttoned-up prude will be scandalized. Elisa Schwartzbaum of Entertainment Weekly gave the film a B, writing "The's a perfectly normal way of consuming erotica suggests that the movie 50 Shades of Grey will work better as home entertainment when each viewer can see past the blah blah about how well a Christian plays the piano and pause in all the fleeting image of the man minus his pants." In the Sydney Morning Herald, Timothy Laurie and Jessica Keane argue that the film provides a language for a decision-making around violence more developed than most Hollywood fodder, and the film fleshes out an otherwise legalistic concept like consent into a living, breathing, and at times uncomfortable interpersonal experience. It dramatizes the dangers of unequal negotiation and the practical complexity of identifying one's limits and having them respected. Various critics noted the similarities between 50 Shades of Grey and Adrian Lyne's Weeks 1986. Both films are literary adaptations centering on a sadomasochistic affair. In June 2012, the film company Smashed Pictures announced its intent to film a pornographic version of the 50 Shades book trilogy entitled 50 Shades of Grey and 30 adaptation. The release date of January 10, 2013 was announced in November 2012. Universal, which had secured the 50 Shades film rights, filed a lawsuit against Smash Pictures stating that the film violated its copyright, that it was not filmed as a parody adaptation but copies without a reservation from the unique expressive elements of the 50 Shades trilogy, progressing through the events of 50 Shades of Grey and into the second book, 50 Shades Darker. The lawsuit asked for an injunction for the profits from all sales of the film, as well as damages, saying that a quickly and cheaply produced pornographic work is likely to cause plaintiffs irreparable harm by poisoning public perception of the 50 Shades trilogy. In the forthcoming Universal film, Smash Pictures responded to the lawsuit by issuing a counterclaim and requesting the continuance, stating that much or all of the 50 Shades material was part of the public domain because it was originally published in various venues as a fan fiction based on the Twilight series. A lawyer for Smash Pictures further commented that the federal copyright registrations for the books were invalid and unenforceable, and that the film did not violate copyright or trademark laws. The lawsuit was eventually settled out of court for an undisclosed sum, and Smash Pictures agreed to stop on further production or promotion of the film. In April 2015, The Hollywood Reporter reported that James' husband Niley Leonard was enlisted to write the script for the film sequel. In the same month, the 2015 Universal Cinema in Las Vegas, Universal announced the release dates of the sequels, with 50 Shades Darker being A released on February 10, 2017 and 50 Shades Freed was released on February 9, 2018. However, the sequels did not see a Sam Taylor Johnson returning as director on August 20, 2015. The U.S. House of Cards director James Foley was a front-runner to direct the sequel in November 2015. Universal Studios announced that the films would be shot back-to-back. A spoof version of the film 50 Shades of Black was released on January 29, 2016. In North America, Marlon Wayne Rica Alvarez wrote the script, in which Wayne stars as Christian Black. The film was distributed by Square-owned Entertainment in Germany and Open Road Films in the United States. Global produce and finance it, as well as handling international releases. Clee Hawk parodied the role of Anastasia Steele with a supporting cast including Afan Crockett, Mikey P.S. Jane Seymour, Andrew Bachelor and Fred Willard. It was released theatrically on January 29, 2016 and described as less funny than the unintentionally funny film. It's trying to lampoon review you of 50 Shades of Grey film. I know why you're reading this, and it isn't for plot description foreplay, so let's just cut to the supposed heavy panting stuff and get it over with, shall we? In the annals of sexually charged event cinema, 50 Shades of Grey barely lights a candle, let alone combusts with unbridled forbidden passion. Nothing comes close to Michael Douglas and Glenna Close humping on the kitchen sink in A Fatal Attraction, or Marlon Brando's inventive use of butter with Maria Schneider in The Last Tango in Paris. Even those ejaculating dolphin fountains and showgirls were steamier than what shows up in this tempered version of La James S&M rewrite of Beauty and the Beast. Consider the deflowering scene. I much prefer the one in Oedipal Lance, a foreign language Oscar contender between a nun in training and a hot saxophone player. Is there any other kind than the hype-escalated glossy bedroom encounter between a lip-biting virgin with a 4.0 GPA and her control Greek billionaire in the 50 Shades? Despite the admirable efforts of Dakota Johnson, who happily has inherited much of Mom Melanie Griffith's minx like Mystique and Jamie Dornan as acquaintances tell me play down an incredibly attractive serial killer in the cult TV show The Fall, there is always a sense of every erratic movement being choreographed by comedians of pubic hair. Here a butt shot, 3 arch that back thrust, those hips 1 2 3. Guess, could you guess that despite here a named director, Sam Taylor Johnson is a woman? Yes, if only for the most telling and perhaps wisest omission, that is much like the Ken doll he resembles. Dornan manhood is kept discreetly hidden, savvy for one fleeting and hardly revealing a crotch cam shot. Basically the only body parts allowed to be erect are Johnson's nipples, which are on display so much they probably required their own saga cars. The thinking behind this choice is so likely that the majority of the millions of women who bought the Poplita phenomenon would rather revel in the romantic fantasy of a brainy lass trying to tame a broken man and fixate on the side of male genitalia in the flesh, especially since 50 Shades is showing in a bunch of IMAX screens. Before you argue otherwise, consider that 2011's highly explicit shame barely grow under $18 million worldwide, even though a gorgeous specimen like Michael Fassbender proudly flashed his chalala every chance he got. There is, however, one move that did make an impression on me. When Johnson's Anastasia Steele straddles the lap of Dornan's Christian Great while he is seated on a piano bench with all of his mournful nocturnal ivory tickling. It's as if Tissot and the Phantom of the Opera had a child together. He manages to use his bent arms like a forklift under her shapely behind, pick her up with ease and whisk her back into the employer. Eventually we learned that instead of dating, Christian likes to recruit young women like Anna, us submissives who willingly yield to his preferred brand of discipline in his high-rise home's well-stocked hideaway, infamously known as the Red Room of Pain. But before we get to the kink, which takes up a surprisingly small amount of the running time, let's address what Taylor Johnson and company, including screenwriter Kelly Marcella, who wrote Saving Mr. Banks, also about another female haunted by a troubled man. Get right, not only are all the awkwardly written source materials Gus Inania! Exclamations! Holy crap! Is irregular and a silly references to our heroine's gymna cricket-like inner goddess nowhere to be found. It seems that someone realized how ridiculous the first meetings between awkward college student Anastasia and intimidating Seattle-based entrepreneurial was Christian R. and decided to inject an abundance of humor or heavy unloaded double entendres alongside a fair amount of tension. Anna and the secretive businessman spark a cat-and-mouse pursuit when she steps in to conduct an interview for her collegiate paper. After her report a roommate falls ill, soon he appears at the Foxy hardware store where she works, suggestively buying cable ties and masking tape, and shows up in the nick of time to save an inebriated Anna from an overly amorous male friend and letting her share his hotel room to recover. It doesn't take you long before her virginity is history and the game is afoot. The film makes sure to include little details that might confuse the uninitiated but will delight the faithful. The phrase later baby Thea Charlie Tango helicopter balloon Thea knit tie the Christian employs when he binds Anna's hands for the first time and then later wears in public to excite her. There are other cast members. Some you might actually recognize: Marcia Gay Harden as Christian's adoptive mother, Jennifer Ale, best known as Elizabeth Bennett in the BBC Ministry's adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, also Anna's mom, but this is primarily a two-hander which hits its entertaining a peak during the infamous contract negotiation scene that involves Anna agreeing to Christian rules of a submissive engagement and striking at those that displease her, but not even all the architecture porn in the world. Taylor Johnson does love a panoramic shot of phallic skyscrapers twinkling at twilight against a cloud-covered seascape can compensate for a story that quickly goes limp. Once will she submit or won't she becomes the primary question. Blindfold writing, crops and whips are employed, but do little to heat up matters, and it turns out is none too pleased with the idea of punishment as a turn-on. But if anyone is punished by 50 Shades, it is the audience. By the time the screen goes black, leaving much unresolved and little in the way of a real climax, no one can blame those who loudly groan after realizing they have to wait for the inevitable sequel for any sort of real satisfaction. Related information: the 50 Shades trilogy may have first surfaced in 2009 as a work of Twilight fan fiction, but it quickly distinguished itself as its own hugely successful, thoroughly dubious spotlight phenomenon. 100 million copies sold and counting, a far cry from Stephanie Meyer's pro-abstinence fantasy. James' startlingly explicit story proved massively popular with women of all ages, ushering the taboo subject of bondage porn into the mom-friendly mainstream. And for all the deserved criticisms of Meyer's pro-style, she really had nothing on James in that department, as demonstrated by sentences like desire pools dark and deadly in my groin, and the muscles inside the deepest darkest part of me CL in the most delicious fashion. Is it sadomasochistic longing, or is it irritably bowel syndrome? At any rate, it may partly explain why our heroine spends much of the movie looking not entirely in control of her lunch. Nervosa dark-haired English literature student at Washington State U. Anastasia Anna Steele Dakota Johnson has been assigned to write a school newspaper article in a Christian Grey, a 27-year-old business magnate and university benefactor who turns out to be not just obscenely wealthy and successful, but is played by Jamie Dornan, impossibly good-looking tow boot. Speaking with Anna in his glass-walled Seattle office, Christian fixes her with the iciest of come hither stares, his cheekbones practically slicing through the narrative torpor. Anna for her part responds by looking quietly dazed with lust, distilling the rich and complicated subtext of James' novel. Oh my god, he's so hot, into a single "oh my god, he's so hot" expression. Following their interview, Christian and Anna heightened their mutual attraction with a few not-so-chance encounters. He sends her some rare first editions, happily not the idiot hits on her at the hardware store where she works, and eventually whisks her off to his apartment by private helicopter, at which point James's contemporary Cinderella story begins to reveal its Angela Carter side. It's not just that this Americana psycho Prince Charming shuns a conventional romance and conducts his relationships on a strictly transactional basis. As he notes early on, Christian is a man of many physical pursuits, which include piloting, stalking, a topless piano playing, and recreational bondage. Specifically, he selects and grooms young women willing to be bound, gagged, clamped, lashed, and probed for his pleasure and presumably their own. Imagine Bruce Wayne with a red room of a pain and leave a bat cave, and you're more than halfway there. Self-described a dominant groom. Stian invites an AIV sexually inexperienced Anna to be his latest submissive and hands her a lengthy contract outlining the very specific requirements and boundaries of their relationship. The only sort of a relationship I have, he declares when she wonders why they can just stick to a dinner and a movie, in slowly easing Anna and the viewer into Christian's private realm of decadence and deviant Taylor Johnson and Marcel, who previously to that rather more tasteful dominant submissive psychodrama saving Mr. Banks, reveal an unexpectedly deaf and a disarmingly irreverent touch, wise Elia grasping more so perhaps than James and some of her more slap-happy readers that a film set in the leathery world of fetishism might not be without a measure of comic potential, relying on the performances of two appealing fresh-faced leads with little prior on-screen baggage. The filmmakers have turned their version of 50 Shades of Grey into a sly tragic comedy of manners. Jane Austen with a writing crop, if you will, or perhaps Charlotte Brun with a peacock feather that extracts no shortage of laughs from the nervous tension between Anna's romantic dream come true and the psychosexual nightmare raging just beneath the surface by happily shedding the book's 500 or so pages of numbingly repetitive inner monologue and adding the crucial perspective of the camera. The filmmakers have also made Anna a somewhat tougher, more skeptical heroine played by Johnson with a very appealing combo of little girl lost naivety and a gradually deepening assertiveness. One of the movie's more amusingly tongue-in-cheek moments finds the two leads seated at opposite ends of a conference stably enacting perhaps the most eccentric contract negotiation since It's a Night at the Opera. Naturally, Anna's agonizing a deferral of her decision whether or not to become Mr. Grey's personal sex Slavia doesn't keep them from sampling each other's wares in the meantime, starting with a scene at roughly the 40-minute mark in which Christie endeavours her of that pesky virginity in a safe handcuff-free environment before slowly introducing her to the exquisite pleasures of pain by the generally prudish standards of the mainstream. The bedroom action on display manages to be appreciably more explicit than the studio norm, while steering clear of anything particularly objectionably. Breasts and buttocks are lavished with a matter-of-fact attention and deep Ishimuse Magarve's precisely framed wide-screen compositions, while a trio of editors including Oscar-winning veteran Anvia Coates, whose many salient credits include The Unfaithful, Out of Sight and Striptease, navigates smoothly between close-ups and full-body shots, their every cue to maintaining a careful visual partition around the actors' modest yet unsurprisingly for a movie with these a particular control summit dynamic. The usual gender-based double standard prevails. Plenty of Johnson, but only a fleeting glimpse of Johnson before her 2009 featured debut with Nowhere Boy Taylor Johnson made an earlier foray into on-screen sexuality with a short film Death Valley included in a Little Seen 2006 art porn omnibus Districtita, which consisted of a young man pleasuring himself in the desert for 8 grindingly tedious minutes. 50 Shades of Grey offers her a much livelier and vastly more commercial feature-length canvas to work on, though it also forces her to elide the more intimate particulars of Christian and Anna's relationship, hemmed in by a raw rating that in a less craven world it should rightly have been Anna NC-17. Obviously there are scenes from the book that were never going to pass a muster here, most notoriously a sex act involving a feminine hygiene product that would have been right at home. Mina Jessa Oshima's 1976 art house, a scandal in the realm of the senses. Certainly there's nothing here to compare with a much more grim and unyielding portrait of female self-debasement in L.S. Vona Trier's Recent an Infomaniac, but to be fair, there's also nothing here that could possibly rival a culture where hardcore bondage is just a one more ho-hum niche in the great big pornucopia of the internet culture that among many consequences also banished provocative sexually mature cinema to the theatrical fringe. In at a respect there's something at once underwhelming and almost heartening about the sleek professional softcore spectacle of 50 Shades of Grey, which substitutes a gentle visual shorthand for James' hot and heavy descriptions, duly cushioned by the rhythmic thrusts and heaves of Danny Elfman's score. The soundtrack selections, including tracks by Ellie Goulding, bands establish an initially lovey-dovey mood that turns vaguely sinister as things progress. The film is arguably much more graphically indulgent as a piece of real estate porn, given the seductive grandeur of production designer David Walker's immaculate sets shot against the wintry up of Vancouver, standing in for the Pacific Northwest locations, and in a picture where Clothing might well have you been beside the point. Mark Bridges' costumes offer precise delineations of a character, from Christian's custom fetus suits and grey necklace, not just a namesake wardrobe choice but a hand-prop to Anna's increasingly relaxed and stylish dresses James novels were repillared in some quarters for glorifying abusive relationships and hailed in others for subverting bondage and a role-play with a striking vision of a female empowerment. Whatever one's interpretation, the story they tell is meant to be one of redemption, in which Anna proves herself to be the true dominant by luring the abused, damaged Christian out of his playroom and into the world of functional human relationships. One represented here by his adoptive mother Margay Herndon and Anna's sweet but distracted mother Jennifer Rayl and spirited best friend Alo Mumford, all glimmering beacons of sanity and emotional stability. Unfortunately, it's a drama that can scarcely sustain one movie, let alone three, and as our heroine becomes ever more aware of just how dark Christian's the dark side is, 50 Shades of Grey starts to lose its sense of humor and elicit the wrong kind of giggles, climaxing with a hilariously overblownness and demonology laden with so many slow-motion dissolves as to suggest that Anna wasn't the only one wearing a blindfold during the assembly. The final half hour or so is punishing in more than just a literal sense, bringing us to a less than a scintillating cliffhanger in the now Dornan manner of book-based fan-driven a franchise fared, or Anna charismatic presence largely nails, among other things, the combination of intense formality and playful loudness that defines Christian Grey, but he proves rather less skilled at illuminating the complex inner life of a sexual deviant. He exercise control in all things he notices early, unspoken, like a man who doesn't realize he's still got 2 sequels to go. More details of 50 Shades of Grey film. Even as a book, 50 Shades of Grey is a bizarre thing prior to becoming a worldwide phenomenon. Author L.J. Meza kinky, erratic novel began as Twilight fan fiction and was later reworked into an original self-published ebook. Since then, 50 Shades has gone on to become one of the most talked about book series of the last decade, selling over 100 million copies since its release in 2012. Suffice it to say, a 50 Shades movie and now sequels was a foregone conclusion. Booted the press leading up to its release had some most fans worried, since the chemistry between co-stars Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson seemed to be non-existent. As it turns out, that's the least of 50 Shades' problems. In fact, the 2 leads are actually pretty good together. I mean, the dialogue is cool and the story is downright idiotic, but it's mostly just hilarious. At my packet screening, almost every scene was met with huge bursts of ironic laughter. In a way, it's almost impressive how terribly it is, especially for people like me who haven't read the books. The problem is, I'm not so sure the cast and crew are in on the joke. For the uninitiated, 50 Shades of Grey follows lit student Anastasia Steele Johnson, who has a favor to her roommate, interviews wealthy entrepreneur Christian Grey Dornan. However, upon meeting the wide-eyed, lip-biting Anna, becomes smitten with a Christian, and soon the two engage in a torrid romance fueled by the billionaire's S&M obsession. Things go surprisingly well at first. It isn't long before Anna wants a normal relationship with Christian. What follows is a sluggish but occasionally engaging push and pull between two drastically different people. Like I said, as far as the casting goes, it could have been way worse. Johnson actually makes the whole thing pretty bearable thanks to Hirakoi's sense of humor. Even during the handful of serious parts, she really sells her character's innocence and a struggle. Meanwhile, Dornan as well has a hands. Honestly, he's the weaker of the 2 leads, but his dynamic with Johnson is solid, especially during their steamier encounters. If nothing else, both actors fully commit to their role. There's also something to be said about a 50 Shades direction. Sam Taylor Johnson is probably best known for her striking visual artwork, so it comes as no surprise that her sleek, minimalist style here is one of the highlights. Unfortunately, the subject matter lacks the energy and shock value it needs. Again, I can't speak for the books, but it's not nearly as hot and bothered. Also, you might think not to sound desensitized, but in terms of the infamous sex scenes, arguably the biggest selling point of the movie, 50 Shades is pretty darn tame and trying to please everyone. The movie's core theme of sexual discovery is lost on a tepid raw rating. That's not to mention the story itself, which is an absolute travesty. Imagine that's due to the strained source material, but the whole movie is just only a big setup for the sequel, and it's only all over the place. Granted, there are moments of both levity and attention, but those are few and far between. While the film tries to infuse some depth into the 2 main characters, so their storyline never reaches A satisfying peak in the end. It gives way to all the usual romance novel cliches, which leaves me wondering what all the fuss was about. I'd like to think 50 Shades of Grey knows exactly what it is. A corny selfie come to life, and if that's the case, it's almost admirable in its attempt at spectacle. The two leads are also nice. Unfortunately, Sam Taylor Johnson's movie adaptation gets so caught up in the intrigue and melodrama that it never really finds its groove. Even the film's raw sex appeal is lacking, which just leaves a poorly plotted story and laughable dialogue. Max Nicholson is a writer for and he desperately seeks your approval. Few information about this film. 50 Shades of Grey is a movie version of the infamous novel, mixing romance with sadomasochism. Anastasia, 21-year-old college senior, falls for Christian Grey, a 27-year-old business magnate in Seattle. Anna and Christian are mutually attracted to only another, but Christian warns her he doesn't do romance or make love. In fact, he's more interested in having a consensual sadomasochistic relationship where she will be his submissive. However, when Christian learns Anna has never made love sexually with anyone, Christian does exactly that. Even so, he still wants to make her his submissive. 50 Shades of Grey plays like a melodramatic romance. It's a very cliche example of fluffy Hollywood romance, but one that's rated hard R and should be rated NC-17. Not only is 50 Shades of Grey corny and cliched, it also becomes somewhat silly and nonsensical. For instance, a Christian says he doesn't do romance, but his actions later prove that he does and he can. Although the story shows Anna changing Christian more than he changes her, 50 Shades still displays abhorrent examples of emotional abuse and sexual violence. Directed by Sam Taylor Johnson, a screenplay by Kelly Marcel, produced by Michael Duca, L. James Dana Brian Eshia, starring Dakota Johnson, Jamie Dornan, Jennifer Hale, Marcia Gay Hardina. Cinematography Seamus McGarvey, edited by Deborah Neil Fisher and Coates Lisa Goulding. Music by Danny Elfman. Production accompanies Focus Features, distributed by Universal Pictures. Release date February 9, 2015. Running time 125 minutes. Country United States. Language English. Budget $40 million. Box office 56.97 million. 50 Shades of Grey is a 2015 American erotic romantic drama film directed by Sam Taylor Johnson from a screenplay by Kelly Marcel, produced by Focus Features, Michael Dell Productions and Trigger Street Productions, and distributed by Universal Pictures. It is based on L. James' 2011 novel of the same name and serves as the first installment in the 50 Shades film series, starring Dakota Johnson, Jamie Dornan, Jennifer Hale and Marcia Gay Harden. The film story follows Anastasia Anna Steele Johnson, a college graduate who begins a sadomasochistic relationship with young business magnate Christian Grey. Development of the film commenced in March 2012 when Universal and Focus Features secured the rights to the trilogy following a bidding war. After Marcel was hired to write the film's screenplay, multiple directors including Joe Wright, Patty Jenkins, Bill Kane, Bennett Miller and Steven Soderbergh were attached to the film. Taylor Johnson was confirmed as the director in June 2013. She cited Weeks 1986, Last Tango in Paris 1972 and Blue is the Warmest Color 2013 as her inspirations for the film. The main cast joined the project between October and December 2013. Principal photography commenced in December 2013 and concluded in February 2014. Reshoot involving scenes between Dornan and Johnson took place in Vancouver during the week of October 2014. Danny Elfman was hired to compose the film score. 50 Shades of Grey premiered at the 69th Berlin International Film Festival on February 11, 2015 and was released in IMAX formats on February 13 by Universal Pictures. Despite receiving mixed to unfavorable reviews, it was an immediate box office success, breaking numerous box office records and earning $5,697 million worldwide against a budget of $40 million. The soundtrack album was also successful. Love Me Like You Do by English singer Ellie Goulding was nominated for the Golden Globe Award for Best Original Song, while earned it by a Canadian singer. The Weeknd was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Song at the 88th Academy Awards. The film was the most awarded at the 36th Golden Raspberry Awards, winning 6 nominations including Worst Picture and both leading roles. 50 Shades of Grey was succeeded by two two sequels, 50 Shades as a Darker and 50 Shades Free, released in 2017 and 2018 respectively, both of which received similar negative critical reception but commercial success. The 21-year-old Anastasia Anna Steele is an English literature major at Washington State University, Vancouver in Vancouver, Washington, when her roommate Kdal Kavanaugh catches a cold and is unable to interview Christian Grey, a 27-year-old billionaire entrepreneur for the Collegian newspaper, and agrees to take Kate Placia at Christian Seattle headquarters. She stumbles her way through the meeting. A Christian who is that year's SWIP commencement speaker takes an interest in her and she in him, and soon after he visits the hardware store where Anna works and offers to do a photo shoot to accompany the article. Shihada interviewed him for Christian asks Anna out for coffee but leaves abruptly after she confesses to being a romantic, saying he is not the man for her. He later sends her first edition copies of two Thomas Hardy novels, including Tess of Theaterville, as a gift, with a quote from the latter book about the dangers of their relationships. On an accompanying card, Anna and her friends celebrate a graduation at a local bar. After drinking too much, she calls Christian, saying she is returning the books and berating him for his behavior towards her. He goes to the bar to find her arriving just as her photographer friend Josh Rodriguez attempts to kiss her against her will. Anna, suddenly sick, throws up and passes out. The next morning she wakes up in Christian's hotel room. Really, that nothing happened between them, but after the two make out in an elevator and he takes her for a ride in his helicopter, a romance starts to develop. He insists, however, that she signed a non-disclosure agreement preventing her from revealing details about their relationship. He explains that he is a dominant who engages in sexual bondage relationships, but only as defined in a contract between the participants. Anna reveals that she is a virgin while considering the agreement and negotiating her own terms, and after briefly visiting his raided room, a place stocked with a bed and a variety of whips and shackles, she and the Christian spend the night together. The next morning, after making pancakes and meeting Christian's adoptive mother Thea to go for a drive, during which a Christian explains that he was reduced to his dominant practices at age 15 by a woman Anna dubs Mrs. Robinson. His parents of course know nothing about this, even though Mrs. Robinson was and still is a friend of the family. Jan bestows a series of gifts and favors upon Anna, including a new car and a laptop. After she and Kate move to Seattle, he insists that she go over his contract before moving forward. After looking into it in some detail, Anna and says no, but Isa persuaded otherwise and finds herself willingly giving her consent. During a dinner at his parents' home, Anna suddenly mentions she is leaving the next day to visit her mother in Georgia. This makes a Christian angry, especially when she says she wants more than the one-sided relationship he's proposing. She then goes to Georgia, visits a lounge for cocktails, and is shocked when Christiana shows up. He meets her mother, takes her air gliding, then returns to Seattle to attend to a business emergency. After returning home, Anna and Christian have a night in his red room. She consents to what he wants, but he remains emotionally distant, upsetting her while still considering the contract, and in an effort to understand Christiana's psychology, Anna asks him to demonstrate the worst punishment he would inflict on her for rule breaking. He whips her with his belt, making her count each stroke. Out loud crushed, she declared shares her love for him but says his behavior is unacceptable, to which he replies that he is too screwed up to have the relationship that she wants. Devastated and depressed, Anna leaves Christian and he promises to send her a check for the car he sold without her consent. As he goes after her, their eyes lock and she holds his gaze, saying his name is Thea. Elevator doors close. By early 2012, several Hollywood studios were keen to obtain film rights to the New York Times' best-selling 50 Shades trilogy of fan novels. Warner Brothers, Sony, Paramount, Universal and Mark Wahlberg's production company submitted bids for the film rights. Universal Pictures and Focus Features secured the rights to the trilogy in March 2012. Author James sought to retain some control during the movie's creative process. James chose the social network producers Michael Duca and Dan Brunetti to produce the film, although American Psycho writer Bret Easton Howe publicly expressed his desire to write the screenplay for 50 Shades of Grey. Kelly Marcel, screenwriter of Saving Mr. Banks, was hired for the job. Patrick Marber was brought in by Taylor Wood to polish the screenplay, specifically to do some character work. Universal hired Mark Baumbach for script doctoring. Mark Bridges served as a costume designer. Entertainment Weekly estimated the film's budget as $140 million or or so. By May 9, 2013, the studio was considering a Joe W. to direct, but this proved unworkable due to WR's schedule. Other directors who had been under consideration included Patty Jenkins, Bill Ken Bennett Miller and Steven Soderbergh. In June 2013, Leaders James announced that Sam Taylor Johnson would direct the film adaptation. Johnson was paid over $2 million for directing the film. A Week's Last Tango in Paris and Blue Issa the Warmest Color were all cited by Taylor Johnson as inspirations for the film. In an interview in June 2017, Taylor Johnson cited difficulties working with author L. James causing her to leave the series. She said, "I can never say I regret it because that would just finish me off. With the benefit of hindsight, would I go through it again? Of course I wouldn't. I'd be mad." Bret Easton Ellis stated that Robert Pattinson had been James' first choice for the role of Christian Grey, but James felt that casting Nation and his Twilight co-star Kristen Stewart in the film would be weird. Ian Somerhalder and Chase Crawford both expressed interest in the role of Christian. Homer later admitted if he had been considered, the filming process would ultimately have conflicted with his shooting a schedule for the CBA series The Vampire Diaries. On September 2, 2013, James revealed that Charlie Hunnam and Dakota Johnson had been cast as Christian Grey and Anastasia Steele respectively. The short list of other actresses considered for the role of Anastasia included Alicia Vandermeegen, Putzel Elizabeth Olsen, Shea Woodley and Felicity Jones. Key Hazel auditioned for an unspecified role. Lucy Hale also auditioned for the film. Emilia Clarke was also offered the role of Anastasia but turned down the part because of the nudity required. Taylor Johnson would give every actress who auditioned for the role of Anastasia 4 pages to read of a monologue from Ingrid Bergman's persona. The studio originally wanted Ryan Gosling for a Christian, but he was not interested in the role. Garrett Hunt was also considered, but he could not connect with the character. Stephen Amell said he would not have wanted to play the role of Grey because I actually didn't find him to be that interesting. Nothing about Christian Grey really spoke to me. Hunan initially turned down the role of Christian but later reconsidered it following a meeting with studio heads and said, for the audition process I felt really intrigued and excited about it, so I went and read the first book to get a clear idea of who this character was, and I felt even more excited at the prospect of bringing him to life. Taylor Johnson and I kind of both suggested do a reading with Dakota, who was her favorite, and as soon as we got in the room and I started reading with Dakota, I knew that I definitely wanted to do it. There's just like a tangible chemistry between us. It felt exciting and fun and weird and compelling. In response to the negative reaction that the casting drew off from fans, producer Dana Brunette said, "There is a lot that goes into casting that isn't just looks, talent, availability, their desire to do it, a chemistry with other actor, etc. So if your favor wasn't cast, then it is most likely due to something on that list. To keep that in mind while hating and keep a perspective." During October 2013, actress Jennifer Hale was in talks for the role of Anastasia's mother Carla. On October 12, 2013, Universal Pictures announced that Hunan had exited the film due to conflicts with the schedule of his FXA series Sons of Anarchy. Jamie Dornan, Christian Cook, Theo James Franco, Isaac Arnold, Scott Eastwood, Luke Bracey and Billy Magnuson were at the top of the list to replace him as CHR. Christian Grey. Finally, on October 23, 2013, Dornan was cast as Christian Grey. On October 31, 2013, Victor Rasuk was cast as Josie Rodriguez Jr. On November 22, 2013, Ayla Mumford was cast as Kate Kavanaugh. And on December 2, 2013, singer Rita was cast as Christian's younger sister. Mayra originally wanted to work on the soundtrack. On December 3, 2013, Marcia Gay Harden was cast as Christian's mother Grey. In September, filming was scheduled to start on November 5, 2013 in Vancouver, British Columbia. The following month, the producer Michael Duke announced filming would begin on November 13, 2013. A principal photography was again delayed and eventually started on December 1, 2013. Scenes were filmed in the Gastonia district of Vancouver. Bentall 5 was used as the Grey Enterprises building. The University of British Columbia serves also Washington State University, Vancouver, from which Anna graduates. The Fairmont Hotel Vancouver was used as the Heath Manor Hotel. The film was also shot at the North Shore Street The production officially ended on February 21, 2014. A reshoot involving scenes between Dornan and Johnson took place in Vancouver during the week of October 13, 2014. The film was shot under the working title The Adventures of Max and Banks. Uncredited screenwriter Mark Bombaka said he had never been on a project with that much secrecy around it. The set was on lockdown. The film was the last project worked on by prolific Academy Award-winning editor and Coates before her death in 2018. In an alternative ending, both Anna and Christiana experienced flashbacks. Christian jogs Anna the rain while Anna sobs in her apartment. Christian encounters a gift Anna gave him with a note. These reminded me of a happy time. The film's soundtrack was released on February 10, 2015. Earned it by Canadian singer Thea Weekend was released as the lead single on December 24, 2014. The second single Love Me Like You Do by English singer Ellie Goulding was released on January 7, 2015. Both singles reached the top of THR A of the Billboard Hot 100. Thea promotional single Salted W Wound by Australian singer Yet was released on January 27, 2015. As of May 2018, the soundtrack also sold 56,000 copies in the United States. In February 2013, Universal chairman Adam Nelson said the film could be ready to release as early as next summer. The studio initially announced in August 1, 2014 released. However, in November 2013 it was pushed back to February 13, 2015 in time for Valentine's Day. 50 Shades of Grey was first screened at the 65th Berlin International Film Festival on February 11, 2015. The film was released in 75 IMAX screens across the US on February 13, 2015. On January 25, 2014, more than a year prior to release, Universal displayed posters with the phrase "Mr. Great will see you now" in 5 locations across the United States. On July 9, 2014, the book's author L.J. Meza said on Twitter that the film's trailer would be released on July 24, 2014. By a debuted teaser for a Thea trailer on her Instagram account 5 days before the trailer's release on July 24. Dornan and Johnson were on Thea Today's show to present part of Thea trailer appropriate for morning television. The full trailer, which contained more racy scenes, was released later the same day on the internet. 200 days before its initial theatrical release, the trailer featured a new version of Crazy in Love by Beyond, which was scored and arranged by her frequent collaborator Boots. The trailer was viewed 36.4 million times in the week after its July 24 release. This made it the most viewed trailer on YouTube in 2014 until it was surpassed in October by the trailer for Avengers Age of Ultron. However, in mid-December, the trailer reached 93 million views and was again the most viewed of 2014. The trailer accumulated over 100 million views in its first week of release through different channels and websites, becoming the biggest trailer ever released in history. By February 2015, the trailer had been viewed more than 193 million times on YouTube alone, and by late February, 50 Shades of Grey related material garnered over 329 million views, including 113 million views for its official trailer. A second trailer was released on November 13, 2014. A third trailer aired during Super Bowl Roman 49 on February 1, 2015. The film was promoted through an AIDA campaign that asked people whether they were curious. Nick Carpo, Universal's president of domestic distributions, our campaign gave people permission to see the film. Valentine's is a big deal for couples and a great relationship event, and the date with a long President's Day weekend created a perfect storm for us. This positioned us to take full advantage of the romance angle, which is how we sold the film in our marketing campaign. He said there was initial speculation that the film could receive an NC-17 rating in the United States. Studios typically steer away from the adults-only rating due to the impact the classification has on a film's commercial viability, with some theater chains refusing to exhibit NC-7 rated films, while screenwriter Marcel said she expected the film to be NC-7 rated. Producer Duo anticipated the less restrictive R rating on Jan. IRI 5/2015 had to give the film an raw rating, basing its decision on stronger sexual content, including dialogue, some unusual behavior and graphic nudity and language. On January 30th in Australia, the film was rated MA 15+ by the AH for strong sex scenes, sexual themes and nudity. On February 2, 2015, the British BBFC classified the film an 18A certificate mentioning strong sex scene. Canada, Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta and British Columbia. The film was rated .18 by the IMDb and BBFC respectively due to its occasional upsetting or disturbing scenes and a partial or full nudity in the brief sexual situation. In Quebec, the Rideau rated the movie under the 16+ category for its eroticism. In France, the film earned a 12 rating. In Lebanon, the film earned an NC-21 rating. In Argentina, the Advisory Commission of Cinematographic Exhibition, the rating arm of the Inca, rated the film SAMA 16R. In Mexico, the film earned a C rating, which is equivalent to that no persona under the age of 18 cool. Enter to see the feature film for any reason. Anti-pornography watchdog group Morality in Media argued that the film's rating severely undermines the violent theme in the film and does not adequately inform parents and patrons of the film's content, and that the was encouraging sexual violence by letting the film by without an NC-17 rating. The film was scheduled for a February 12, 2015 release in Malaysia, but it was denied a certificate by the Malaysian Film Censorship Board LPF for its unnatural and sadistic content. The chairman Abdul Hakam Abdul Hamid said 50 Shades was more pornography than a movie. The film was also banned in Indonesia, Kenya, Russia's North Caucasus, the United Arab Emirates, Papua New Guinea, Cambodia and India. The film was released in Nigeria for a week before being removed from cinemas by the National Film and Video Censors Board. But studios decided against pursuing a theatrical release in China. The sex scenes were censored after protests from various religious groups in the Philippines, and as a result it is in a limited release in that country with an R18 rating from the MTRCB. Similarly, a cut version was released in Zimbabwe. Roughly 20 minutes were cut from the film for screening in Vietnam, leaving no sex scenes. The scene in which Hannah is beaten with a belt is skipped entirely. On February 2nd in Michigan, a mono petition to halt the film's release at a local Celebration Cinema. Despite the man's efforts, the president of Thea Cinemas declined to cancel the release of the film. He said, "We've been in a business for 70 years and people often at times object to content, and it's not our job to censor the content of a widespread movie. It's not in our best interest, it's not in the community's best interest." The film sold 3,008 tickets before the release and was expected to sell a total of 10,008 tickets. Thomas Williams of the Notre Dame Center for Ethics and Culture commented on the release of the film in the United States on Valentine's Day, stating the irony of Universal Pictures' decision to release its bonded erotica film 50 Shades of Grey on the day dedicated to honoring a Christian martyr has not gone unnoticed to many observers who seem to find the choice cheesy and classy at best. 50 Shades of Grey was released via DVD and Blu-ray on May 8, 2015. The Blu-ray edition features an unrated cut of the film. The version includes an additional 3 minutes of footage, the bulk of which are in the form of an alternative ending. Upon its release on home media in the US, the film topped both the New and Videoson First Alert chart, which tracks combined Blu-ray disc and DVD sales, as well as the Blu-ray disc sales chart for 10 consecutive weeks up to the week ending May 17, 2015. 50 Shades of Grey grossed $166.2 million in the United States and Canada and $43.5 million in other countries. As for a worldwide total of $5,697 million against a budget of $4 million, it became the third highest grossing film directed by a woman at the time of release, behind Mamma Mia and Kung Fu Panda 2, and at the time of the end of its theatrical run it was the fourth highest grossing R-rated film of all time, behind The Hangover Part Roman 2, The Passion of the Christ and The Matrix Reloaded. Deadline Hollywood calculated the net profit of the film to be $26.55 million when factoring together all expenses and revenues for the film. Tickets went on sale in the United States from January 11, 2015. According to ticket selling site Fandango, 50 Shades of Grey is the fastest selling R-rated title in the site's 15-year history, surpassing Sex and the City 2. It also had the biggest first week of ticket sales on Fandango for a non-sequel film, surpassing 2012's The Hunger Games. It is fourth overall in Fandango's list of top-ranked ticket sales behind the Twilight Saga. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 in the Hunger Games. The demand prompted us theatre owners to add new showtimes weeks before the film's release. Several box office analysts suggested as much as a $60 million a domestic four-day opening, while Box Office Mojo reported that a $100 million opening could be possible outside the United States. 50 Shades of Grey pre-record 4.5 million tickets in 39 markets. In the UK it sold £1.3 million, $1.9 million worth of tickets a week before release. On release it set several records at the box office, including in the US and Canada. It is the highest grossing sex film, the 17th highest grossing film of 2015, and the fourth highest grossing romantic film of all time. It opened in the US and Canada simultaneously with Kingsman: The Secret Service on Thursday, February 12, 2015 across 283 theaters and was widened to a 3D 646 theaters the next day, making it the widest R-rated opening, surpassed by Mad Max Fury Road and the fourth widest R-rated release of all time. It earned $8.6 million from Thursday night previews, which is the second highest late-night gross for a film released in February, behind Deadpool, and the third highest for an R-rated film behind Deadpool and The Hangover Part. Roman 2. The film topped the box office on opening day, grossing $3.20 million, including Thursday previews from 3D 646A theaters, setting a record for highest February opening day previously held by The Passion of the Christ, and for the highest overall among R-rated films during its traditional three-day opening. The film opened at #1 at the box office, earning $85 million, setting records for the biggest opening weekend for a film released in February, a record previously held by The Passion of the Christ. Women comprised 82% of the total audiences during its opening day and 68% on Valentine's Day. Revenue from the second weekend dropped massively by 73.9% to $22.25 million, which is the second biggest drop for 3's Awesome Plus screen release, only behind Friday the 13th's 80.4% drop, and the biggest for 3 500 plus screen release. It is just the 8th film to open on more than 3 screens to drop by 70% or more. The film topped the box office for 2 consecutive weekends before falling to no 4 in its third weekend, while Focus took the top spot outside US and Canada box office. Analysts were predicting as much as $158 million opening. It opened Wednesday, February 11, 2015 in 4 countries, earning $3.7 million. It opened in 3 foreign more countries on February 12, earning a $28.6 million in 2 days. The film set opening day records for Universal Pictures in 25 markets and opening dry records for an R-rated film in 34 territories through Sunday, February 15th. It earned an opening weekend total of $156 million from 58 countries from 10,979 screens. $173.6 million through Monday were opened at #1 in 54 of the 58 countries, marking the biggest overseas opening for an R-rated film, the fourth biggest of 2015 and Universal's third biggest overseas opening weekend ever. The film set an all-time opening record in 13 markets, Universal's biggest opening weekend ever in 30 markets, and biggest opening for any R-rated film in 31 markets. The biggest opener outside of the United States was witnessed in the UK, Ireland and Malta, where it earned a $13.55 million $2.8 million in its opening weekend, which is the biggest debut ever for an 18-rated film and the second biggest for a non-sequel film behind I Am Legend. In just 10 days of their release, it became the highest-grossing 18-rated film of all time. It topped the UK box office for 2 consecutive weekends. Other high openings include Germany $14.1 million, France $12.3 million, Russia $11 million, Italy $10.1 million, Spain $87 million, Brazil $8.3 million, Mexico $8.1 million, Australia $8 million. In Japan, the film was unsuccessful, opening at no. 5 with $682 but falling out of the top 10 the following week. The Hollywood Reporter cited possibly reasons for the film's failure, attributing it to the delayed release of the New Japanese-language editions of the book's poor timing for the film release and an R-15 re-edit blurring out parts of the sex scenes that topped the box office outside of the US for 3 consecutive weekends until it was overtaken by Warner Bros. Jupiter ascending in its 4th weekend. Ida became Universal Pictures' highest-grossing R-rated film of all time overseas, breaking Ted's record. Universal Pictures' highest-grossing film in 14 countries and Universal Pictures' highest-grossing film overseas in total earnings. Its largest markets overseas are the UK, Ireland and Malta. 52.5 million $, Germany 43.7 million $, Brazil 31.3 million, France 29.5 million and Spain 22.6 million. 50 Shades of Grey received mixed to unfavorably reviews with criticism of its acting, a screenplay and pacing. However, some critics noted it as an improvement over the book and others praised the cinematography and set design as well as the soundtrack. The review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes reported a 25% approval rating with an average rating of 4. Twin Titan based on 280 reviews. The website's critical consensus reads, "Really creatively better endowed than its print counterpart. 50 Shades of Grey is a less than satisfying experience on the screen." And Metacritic gave the film a score of 46 out of 100 based on reviews from 46 critics indicating mixed or various reviews. In CinemaScore polls conducted during the opening weekend, cinema audiences gave the film an average grade of C+ on an A+ to F scale. Claudia Puig of USA Today wrote that the dialogue is laughable, the pacing is sluggish and the performances are only a note. Moira MacDonald of the Seattle Times wrote 50 Shades of Grey, the movie for the record is not quite as bad as 50 Shades of Grey the book, but that's not saying much. We got discovered critic Isaac Feldberg gave the film 1.5 stars out of 5 and wrote that Ida feels like two distinct films grappling for dominance over the screen, one a sensual and stylish romance and the unknowingly explicit harlot bodice ripper brought to life. Regrettably, the latter and lesser of the two ends up on top. The Guardian led a film critic Peter Bradshaw gave the film a 1 star out of 5, calling it the most purely tasteful and softcore depiction of sadomasochism in cinema history with a strictly daytime soap performances. Alice Scott of the New York Times called the film terrible but wrote that it might nonetheless be a movie that feels good to see, whether you squirm or giggle or roll your eyes or just sit still and to take your punishment. In a positive review for the Daily Telegraph, Robbie Collin called the film sexy, funny and self-aware in every way the original book is, and Elizabeth Weitzman of New York's Daily News praised the directing, a screenplay and Johnson's performance. Booty called Dorrian's performance, the lead's chemistry and the supporting cast underused. She praised the film for honoring the essence of its source and the director's way of balancing atmosphere with actio. And in The Guardian, Jordan Hoffman awarded the film 3 out of 5 stars, writing this big screen adaptation still manages to be about people and even a little bit sweet, and that the sex scenes are there to advance the plot and only the most buttoned-up prude will be scandalized. Lisa Schwarbalb of Entertainment Weekly gave the film a B, writing "The's a perfectly normal way of consuming erotica, suggests that the movie 50 Shades of Grey will work better as home entertainment when each viewer can see past the blah blah about how well a Christian plays the piano and pause in all the fleeting image of the man minus his pants." In the Sydney Morning Herald, Timothy Laurie and Jessica Keane argue that the film provides a language for a decision-making around violence more developed than most Hollywood fodder, and the film fleshes out an otherwise a legalistic concept like consent into a living, breathing and at times uncomfortable interpersonal experience. It dramatizes the dangers of unequal negotiation and the practical complexity of identifying one's limits and having a theme respected. Various critics noted similarities between 50 Shades of Grey and Adrian Lyne's Weeks 1986. Both films are literary adaptations centering on a sadomasochistic affair. In June 2012, the film company Smash Pictures announced its intent to film a pornographic version of the 50 Shades book trilogy entitled 50 Shades of Grey and 30 adaptation, a release date of January January 10, 2013 was announced in November 2012 Universal, which had secured the 50 Shades film rights, filed a lawsuit against Smash Pictures stating that the film violated its copyright, that it was not filmed as a parody adaptation but copies without a reservation from the unique expressive elements of the 50 Shades trilogy, progressing through the events of 50/50 ASH Shades of Grey and into the second book 50 Shades Darker. The lawsuit asked for an injunction for the profits from all sales of the film as well as damages, saying that a quickly and cheaply produced pornographic work is likely to cause plaintiffs irreparable harm by poisoning public perception of the 50 Shades trilogy. In the forthcoming Universal film, Smash Pictures responded to the lawsuit by issuing a counterclaim and requesting a continuance, stating that much or all of the 50 Shades material was part of the public domain because it was originally published in various venues as a fan fiction based on the Twilight series. A lawyer for Smash Pictures further commented that the federal copyright registrations for the books were invalid and unenforceable, and that the film did not violate copyright or trademark laws. The lawsuit was eventually settled out of court for an undisclosed sum, and Smash Pictures agreed to stop on further production or promotion of the film. In April 2015, The Hollywood Reporter reported that James' husband Niall Leonard was enlisted to write the script for the film sequel in the same month at the 2015 Universal Cinema in Las Vegas. Universal announced the release dates of the sequels, with 50 Shades Darker being released on February 10, 2017 and 50 Shades Free was released on February 9, 2018. However, the sequels did not see Sam Taylor Johnson returning as director on August 20, 2015. The U.S. House of Cards director James Foley was a frontrunner to direct the sequel. In November 2015, Universal Studios announced that the films would be shot back-to-back. A spoof version of the film 50 Shades of Black was released on January 29, 2016 in North America. Marlon Wayans and Rick Alvarez wrote the script, in which Wayans stars as Christiana Black. The film was distributed by Square Entertainment in Germany and Opina Road Films in the United States, and Global produced and financed it as well, also handling international releases. Clea Hawk parodied the role of Anastasia Steele with supporting cast including Fanny Crockett, Mike EPS, Jane Seymour, Andrew Waugh Bachelor and Fred Willard. It was released theatrically on January 29, 2016 and described as L.S. funny than the unintentionally funny film. It's trying to lampoon review of 50 Shades of Grey film. I know why you're reading this, and it isn't for plot description foreplay, so let's just cut to the supposed heavy panting stuff and get it over with, shall we? In the annals of sexually charged event cinema, 50 Shades of Grey barely lights a candle, let alone combusts with unbridled forbidden passion. Nothing comes close to Michael Douglas and Glenna Close humping on the kitchen sink in A Fatal Attraction, or Marlon Brando's inventive use of butter with Maria Schneider in The Last Tango in Paris. Even those ejaculating dolphin fountains and showgirls were steamier than wet. Shows up in this tempered version of Law James S&M rewrite of Beauty and the Beast. Consider the deflowering scene. I much prefer the one in Oedipal Lands. A foreign language are contender between a nun in training and a hot saxophonia player. Is there any other kind than the hype escalated glossy bedroom encounter between a tea-biting virgin with a 4.0 GPA and her control freak billionaire in 50 Shades? Despite the admirable efforts of Dakota Johnson, who happily has inherited much of Mom Roland Griffith's minx like Mystique and Jamie Dornan Woe as acquaintances tell me, play down an incredibly attractive serial killer in the cult TV show The Fall. There is always a sense of every erratic moment being choreographed by committee. A wisp of pubic hair here, a butt shots very arched that back thrust those hips. 1, 2, 3, a gasp. Could you guess that despite here named director Sam Taylor Johnson is a woman? Yes, if only for the most telling and perhaps wisest omission that is much like the Ken doll he resembles. Dornan manhood is kept discreetly hidden, savvy for one fleeting and hardly revealing a crotch cam shot. Basically the only body parts allowed to be R.R. Johnson's nipples, which are on display so much they probably required their own saga cards. The thinking behind this choice is so likely that the majority of the millions of women who What the pop leader phenomenon would rather revel in the romantic fantasy of a brainy lass trying to tame a broken man and fixate on the side of male genitalia in the flesh, especially since 50 Shades is showing in a bunch of IMAX screens before you argue otherwise. Consider that 2011's highly explicit Shame barely grossed under $18 million worldwide, even though a gorgeous specimen like Michael Fassbender proudly flashed his chalala every chance he got. There is however one move that it did make an impression on me. Wena Johnson's Anastasia Steele straddles the lap of Oran's Christian great while he is seated on a piano bench with all of his mournful nocturnal ivory tickling. It's as if Toad and the Phantom of the Opera had a child together. He manages to use his bent arms like a forklift under her shapely behind, pick her up with ease and whisk her back into the boyer. Eventually we learned that instead of dating Christian likes to recruit young women like Hannah. Also submissives who willingly yield to his preferred brand of discipline in his high-rise home's well-stocked hideaway, infamously known as the Red Room of Pain. But before we get to the kink, which takes up a surprisingly small amount of the running time, let's address Weta Taylor Johnson and company, including a screenwriter Kelly Marcel who wrote How Saving Mr. Banks, also about an author, a female haunted by a troubled man. Gated right. Not only are all the awkwardly written source materials gushy and exclamations holy crap is irregular and a silly references to our heroine's gymnast cricket-like inner goddess nowhere to be found. It seems that someone realized how ridiculous the first meetings between awkward college student Anastasia and intimidating Seattle-based entrepreneurial was Christian Aranda decided to inject an abundance of humor or heavy unloaded double entendres alongside a fair amount of tension and the secretive businessmen spark a cat-and-mouse pursuit when she steps in to conduct an interview for her collegia paper. After her reporter roommate falls ill, soon he appears at the Foxy hardware store where she works, suggestively buying cable ties and masking tape, and shows up in the nick of time to save an inebriated Anna from an overly amorous male friend and letting her share his hotel room to recover. It doesn't take you long before her virginity is history and the game is afoot. The film makes sure to include little details that might confuse the uninitiated but will delight the faithful. The phrase later baby Thea Charlie Tango helicopter balloon, the neat tie the Christian employs when he binds Anna's hands for the first time and then later wears in public to excite her. There are other cast members some you might actually recognize. Marcia Gay Harden as Christian's adoptive mother, Jennifer, best known as Elizabeth Bennet in the BBC Minor adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, is Anna's mom Buddha. This is primarily a two-hander which hits its entertaining peak during the infamous contract negotiation scene. It involves Anna agreeing to Christian's rules of submissive engagement and striking out those that displease her, but not even all the architecture porn in the world. Taylor Johnson does love via panoramic shot of phallic skyscrapers. The twinkling at twilight against a cloudy-covered cityscape can compensate for a story that quickly goes limp once will she submit or won't she becomes the primary question. Blindfold right and crops and whips are employed but do little to heat up matters, and it turns out Isa none too pleased with the idea of punishment is a turn-on. But if anyone is punished by 50 Shades, it is the audience by the time the screen goes black, leaving much unresolved and little in the way of a real climax. No one can blame those who loudly groan after realizing they have to wait for the inevitable sequel for any sort of real satisfaction-related information. The 50 Shades trilogy may have first surfaced in 2009 as a work of Twilight fan fiction, but it quickly distinguished itself also its own hugely successful, thoroughly dubious pop-lit phenomenon. 100 million copies sold and counting, a far cry from Stephanie Meyer's pro-abstinency fantasy. James' startlingly explicit story proved massively popular with women of all ages, ushering the taboo subject of bondage porn into the mom-friendly mainstream. And for all the deserved criticisms of Meyer's pro-style, she really had nothing on James in that department, as demonstrated by sentences like desire pulls dark and deadly in my groin, and the muscles inside the deepest darkest part of me clench in the most delicious fashion. Is it sadomasochistic longing, or is it irritably bowel syndrome? At any rate, it may partly explain why our heroine spends much of the movie looking not entirely in control of her lunch. A nervous dark-haired English literature student at Washington State U. Anastasia Anna Steele Dakota Johnson has been assigned to write a school newspaper article in a Christian Grey. A 27-year-old business magnate Princeton University benefactor Wo turns out to be not just obscenely wealthy and successful but is played by Jamie Dornan and possibly good look. About speaking with Anna in his glass-walled Seattle office. Christian fixes her with the iciest of come-hither stares, his cheekbones practically slicing through the narrative torpor. Anna for her part responds by looking quietly dazed with lust, distilling the rich and complicated subtext of James' novel. Oh my god, he's so hot, into a single oh my god he's so hot expression. Following their interview, Christian and Anna heightened their mutual attraction with a few not-so-chance encounters. He sends her some rare first editions happily not the idiot hits on her at the hardware store where she works, and eventually whisks her off to his apartment by private helicopter, at which point James' contemporary Cinderella story begins to reveal its Angela Carter side. It's not just that this Americana psycho Prince Charming shuns a conventional romance and conducts his relationships on a strictly transactional basis. As he notes early on, Christian is a man of many physical pursuits, which include pilot stalking, a topless piano playing, and recreational bondage. Specifically, he selects and grooms young women willing to be bound, gagged, clamped, lashed, and probed for his pleasure and presumably their own. Imagine Bruce Wayne with a red room of a pain and Lee of a Batcave, and you're more than halfway there. A self-described dominant Christian invites the naive, sexually inexperienced Anna to be his latest submissive and hands her a lengthy contract outlining the very specific requirements and boundaries of their relationship. The only sort of a relationship I have, he declares when she wonders why they can just stick to a dinner and a movie, in slowly easing Anna and the viewer into Christian's private realm of decadence and deviance. Taylor Johnson and so, who previously scripted that rather more tasteful dominant submissive psychodrama Saving Mr. Banks, reveal an unexpectedly deaf and disarmingly irreverent touch, Ellie grasping more so perhaps than James and some of her more slap-happy readers. That a film set in the leathery world of fetishism might not be without a measure of comic potential, relying on the performances of two appealing fresh-faced leads with little prior on-screen baggage. The filmmaker have turned their version of 50 Shades of Grey into a slight tragic comedy of manners. Jane Austen with the writing. The film balances romance and psychological tension with surprising wit, creating moments that are both amusing and unsettling. It often feels as if someone has blended the romantic elegance of classic literature with a modern, provocative twist. Much of the humor comes from the uneasy contrast between Anna's fairy tale expectations and the darker psychological world lurking beneath Christian Grey's polished exterior. One of the film's greatest strengths is its decision to strip away the novel's lengthy and repetitive internal monologues. By relying on visual storytelling instead, the filmmakers provide a clearer and more engaging perspective. This approach also transforms Anna into a stronger, more skeptical protagonist. Dakota Johnson delivers a charming performance, combining youthful innocence with growing confidence and emotional resilience as her character gradually learns to challenge Christian's authority. Among the film's more entertaining moments is an unusually formal contract negotiation between the two leads. Sitting across from each other at opposite ends of a conference table, they discuss the terms of Christian's unconventional proposal in a scene that feels both absurd and surprisingly funny. Although Anna hesitates over Christian's offer to become his submissive partner, their physical relationship begins long before she reaches a decision. Their first intimate encounter takes place in a relatively conventional setting, where Christian gently takes her virginity without introducing restraints or other elements of his preferred lifestyle. Only afterward does he begin revealing the more unconventional aspects of his world. By mainstream Hollywood standards, the film's intimate scenes are noticeably more explicit than average while remaining carefully restrained. Cinematographer Seamus McGarvey frames every shot with precision, presenting nudity in a matter-of-fact, elegant manner rather than for shock value. Editors Anne V. Coates, Deborah Neal Fisher, and Lisa Gunning smoothly alternate between close-ups and wider shots, ensuring the scenes remain visually polished while carefully protecting the actor's modesty. As expected, however, the familiar Hollywood double standard remains evident, with considerably more attention given to Dakota Johnson's nudity than Jamie Dornan's. Before directing Nowhere Boy in 2009, Sam Taylor Johnson had already explored themes of sexuality in her short film Death Valley. featured in the 2006 art anthology Districted. That experimental work was deliberately provocative but slow-paced. 50 Shades of Grey offered her a far more energetic and commercially accessible canvas. Although the constraints of a mainstream studio production prevented her from exploring the deeper emotional and sexual complexities of Christian and Anna's relationship, the film's R rating also limits how faithfully it could adapt some of the novel's most controversial material, leaving several infamous scenes absent from the screen version. Even so, the film never approaches the uncompromising sexual intensity of works such as In the Realm of the Senses or Lars von Trier's Nymphomaniac. Compared with those films, 50 Shades of Grey is remarkably restrained. In today's media landscape where explicit content is readily available on linear, the film feels less shocking than its reputation suggested. Instead, it functions as a polished, mainstream interpretation of erotic romance, replacing the novel's graphic descriptions with elegant visual suggestion. Danny Elfman's musical score supports this approach, beginning with romantic, dreamlike melodies before gradually introducing darker, more ominous tones. Songs by artists including Ellie Goulding, Bianca Tilda Copyright, and The Weeknd reinforce the changing emotional atmosphere, moving from tender romance towards psychological unease. Ironically, the film may be even more indulgent in showcasing luxury than sexuality. Production designer David Wasco fills the screen with immaculate interiors that emphasize Christian's extraordinary wealth, while Vancouver convincingly doubles as the misty Pacific Northwest. Costume designer Mark Bridges further defines the characters through fashion, dressing Christian in impeccably tailored suits and signature grey ties while allowing Anna's wardrobe to evolve from modest simplicity into greater confidence and sophistication. E.L. James's novels sparked passionate debate upon publication. Some critics argued they romanticized unhealthy relationships, while others viewed them as stories of female empowerment through consent and emotional agency. Regardless of interpretation, the central narrative is ultimately about redemption. Anna gradually becomes the stronger force in the relationship, encouraging the emotionally damaged Christian to move beyond his carefully controlled world and embrace genuine human connection. Supporting characters including his adoptive mother, played by Marcia Gay Harden, along with Anna's caring mother and loyal best friend, to serve as reminders of the healthy emotional relationships waiting beyond Christian's isolated lifestyle. Unfortunately, the emotional journey struggles to sustain an entire trilogy. As Anna uncovers more of Christian's troubled past, the film gradually loses the playful wit that made its early scenes enjoyable. The humor gives way to unintentionally awkward moments, culminating in an overly dramatic montage that relies heavily on slow-motion editing and visual flourishes, rather than building emotional intensity. These sequences often provoke laughter for the wrong reasons. The final act becomes emotionally exhausting as it pushes the story toward a familiar franchise-style cliffhanger. Jamie Dornan effectively captures Christian Grey's polished confidence, rigid self-control, and occasional flashes of charm, but he is less successful at revealing the deeper psychological conflict beneath the character's carefully maintained exterior. Early in the film, Christian confidently declares, "I exercise control in all things." By the ending, however, it becomes clear that maintaining such control may prove far more difficult than he believed, especially with 2 more chapters of the story still to unfold. Even before it became a movie, 50 Shades of Grey was already an unusual success story. Before turning into a global phenomenon, author E.L. James's erotic romance began as Twilight fan fiction. It was later rewritten into an original novel and self-published as an e-book. From those humble beginnings, the series exploded in popularity, selling more than 100 million copies worldwide after its release and becoming one of the best-selling book franchises of the last decade. Given its enormous success, a film adaptation and eventually 2 sequels was almost inevitable. However, the months leading up to the movie's release were filled with concerns. Many fans worried that lead actors Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan lacked on-screen chemistry, especially after several promotional appearances. Surprisingly, that turned out to be one of the film's smallest issues. In reality, Johnson and Dornan work reasonably well together. The dialogue is often awkward, and the story is undeniably flawed, but the chemistry between the 2 leads is convincing enough to keep the film watchable. During my screening, Nearly every scene was met with loud bursts of ironic laughter. The movie is so unintentionally funny that it's almost impressive. For viewers who haven't read the novels, the experience feels less like a passionate romance and more like an accidental comedy. The only question is whether the filmmakers intended it that way. For those unfamiliar with the story, 50 Shades of Grey follows Anastasia Steele, a shy literature student who agrees to interview wealthy businessman Christian Grey as a favor to her roommate. Their first meeting sparks an immediate attraction, and the two soon begin a passionate relationship. However, Christian reveals that he has no interest in traditional romance. Instead, he prefers a consensual BDSM relationship in which Anastasia would become his submissive. At first, the relationship progresses smoothly, but it isn't long before Anastasia begins wanting something deeper and more conventional. The rest of the film explores the emotional push and pull between two people with completely different expectations of love and intimacy. Casting-wise, things could have been much worse. Dakota Johnson carries much of the film with her subtle humor, charm, and believable performance. Even in the more dramatic scenes, she convincingly portrays Anastasia's innocence, curiosity, and emotional conflict. Jamie Dornan, while undeniably charismatic, delivers the weaker performance of the two. Still, his scenes with Johnson, and particularly the more emotionally intimate moments, are effective, largely because both actors fully commit to their roles. One of the film's strongest aspects is its visual style. Director Sam Taylor Johnson, known for her artistic eye, brings a sleek and polished aesthetic to the movie. The elegant cinematography and minimalist production design create a sophisticated atmosphere. Unfortunately, the material itself lacks the intensity and emotional impact needed to match those visuals. Despite its reputation, the film is surprisingly restrained. Considering the controversy surrounding the novel, many viewers expected something far more provocative. Instead, the much-discussed intimate scenes are relatively tame. In trying to appeal to a broader audience with an R rating, the film softens its exploration of sexuality and loses much of the emotional and thematic power that could have made it more compelling. The biggest weakness, however, is the story. Rather than telling a complete narrative, the film feels like an extended setup for its sequel. The pacing is uneven, and the tone constantly shifts between serious drama, romance, and unintentional comedy. While there are occasional moments of genuine emotion and tension, they are too rare to elevate the overall experience. Attempts to add psychological depth to the main characters never fully pay off, and the story ultimately falls back on familiar romance cliché-copyright-esque, leaving viewers wondering what made the source material such a cultural phenomenon. It would be easier to appreciate 50 Shades of Grey if it fully embraced its melodramatic nature. There are glimpses of entertaining camp throughout the film, and the performances from the two leads are more engaging than the script deserves. Unfortunately, Sam Taylor Johnson's adaptation becomes so focused on mystery, melodrama, and emotional conflict that it never finds a consistent identity. Even the film's much-publicized sensuality lacks genuine passion, leaving behind a weak plot and dialogue that often feels unintentionally funny. Plot summary: 50 Shades of Grey is the film adaptation of V.L. James's best-selling novel, blending romance with BDSM themes. The story follows 21-year-old college student Anastasia Steele, who falls for 27-year-old billionaire Christian Grey in Seattle. Although they were strongly attracted to one another, Christian makes it clear that he does not believe in traditional romance or emotional relationships. Instead, he proposes a consensual dominant-submissive arrangement. Everything changes when Christian discovers that Anastasia has never been sexually involved with anyone before. The relationship gradually becomes more intimate, yet Christian continues trying to introduce her to his unconventional lifestyle. As the story unfolds, Anastasia struggles to decide whether love alone is enough to bridge the emotional gap between them. Overall, the film plays like an emotional Hollywood romance with a darker edge. While it attempts to explore themes of desire, control, and personal boundaries, it often falls back on familiar romantic cliché-copyright-esque. Christian repeatedly claims he is incapable of love, yet many of his actions contradict his words. Although the story suggests that Anastasia changes Christian more than he changes her, critics have argued that the relationship also portrays troubling examples of emotional manipulation and unhealthy power dynamics. Film information. A-Sense title, 50 Shades of Grey. A-Sense release year, 2015. A-Sense director, Sam Taylor Johnson. A-Sense screenplay, Kelly Marcel. A-Sense based on the novel by E. L. James. A-Sense producers, Michael DeLuca, Dana Brunetti, and D. L. James. A-Sense starring Dakota Johnson, Jamie Dornan, Jennifer L. Marcia Gay Harden, Eloise Mumford, Luke Grimes, Rita, Victor Asyuk, Max Martini, and Callum Keith Rennie. A-Sense cinematography, Seamus McGarvey. A-Sense editors, Deborah Neal Fisher, and V. Coates. Lisa Gunning. A-Sense music, Danny Elfman. A-Sense production company, Focus Features. A-Sense distributor, Universal Pictures. A-Sense release date, February 9, 2015. A-Sense running time, 125 minutes. A-Sense country, United States. A-Sense language, English. A-Sense budget, $40 million. A-Sense worldwide box office, approximately $570 million. Thank you for reading this review of 50 Shades of Grey. I hope you found both the review and the film facts informative. If you enjoyed this content, please support the channel by subscribing, give the video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.